I walked through the streets of New Orleans, a city that pulsed with vibrant and mysterious energy. Every corner seemed to whisper ancient secrets, and I felt as if I were being drawn by an invisible force. The music echoed from the bars, mingling with the sound of the rain that began to fall, creating a symphony that enveloped me. It was exactly what I needed to awaken my creativity. Upon entering a jazz bar, the atmosphere immediately captivated me. The soft lights illuminated the stage, where a group of musicians performed with passion. I sat in a corner, watching every movement, every note that resonated in the air. It was as if the music were telling a story, and I was an enchanted spectator. My gaze wandered through the crowd until something caught my attention, an old photograph on a wall, carefully framed. The image showed a young woman, with wavy hair and a smile that could light up even the darkest days. She was on stage, holding a microphone, as if about to sing a song that could change the world. Her name, handwritten in the corner of the photo, was Isabelle. Something stirred within me upon seeing that face. I didn't know why, but I felt an instant connection to her. "Who is she?" I asked the bartender, a gray-haired man with a weary expression, yet still exhibiting a spark of youth in his eyes. "Isabelle. Ah, she was one of the best jazz singers this city has ever seen," he replied, wiping a glass with a cloth. "She disappeared decades ago. A shame, really. She had a rare talent." "Disappeared? What happened?" My curiosity grew with every word he spoke. "Sad stories, my friend. No one knows for sure. Some say she was the victim of a crime. Others believe she just wanted to escape the life she led. What I know is that the city never forgot her. Her spirit still lives in every note we play here." As he spoke, a strange sensation enveloped me. I felt as though I was on the verge of discovering something important, not just about Isabelle, but about myself. The music in the background sounded more intense, as if it were calling me. With a glass of bourbon in hand, I left the bar and walked through the rain, which was now falling harder. The drops hitting the ground formed a rhythm that mingled with the distant echo of the music. I closed my eyes for a moment, allowing the melody to take over me. It was then that the vision came. I saw Isabelle, not as an image in a photo, but as a real presence, singing on a brightly lit stage. Her dress shimmered under the lights, and her voice was hypnotic. But the scene quickly changed. The lights went out, and I saw her being dragged away by someone on a rainy night, her scream echoing in my mind. Fear and confusion overwhelmed me. What was that? A memory? A nightmare? I jolted awake from the vision, the rain still falling around me. What had I seen? The feeling of dread clung to me, and I needed to learn more about Isabelle. Something told me the answer was there, in the streets of New Orleans, waiting to be revealed. Determined, I returned to the bar, my mind filled with questions and a growing urgency in my heart. The bartender was still there, and I knew I needed to talk to him again. "I need to know more about Isabelle," I said, determined. "What can you tell me?" He looked at me, an understanding gaze in his eyes. "If you really want to know, be prepared. The truth may be darker than you imagine." I walked through the streets of New Orleans, feeling the heat and humidity in the air. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, while the jazz music echoed from every corner. It was as if the city were alive, pulsing to an unmistakable rhythm. But despite the beauty around me, a shadow lingered over me. The image of Isabelle, that young singer who had disappeared, wouldn't leave my mind. My curiosity consumed me, and I knew I had to understand what had truly happened to her. As I headed toward the place where she used to perform, an old club called Blue Note, my heart raced. The place had a nostalgic aura, as if the walls were imbued with the voices and laughter of a vibrant past, now melancholic. Upon entering, I was greeted by the smell of cigarettes and bourbon, mingled with the soft echo of a saxophone playing in the background. A portrait of Isabelle adorned the main wall, and her beauty was almost mesmerizing. "You're here for her story, aren't you?" A deep voice pulled me from my reverie. It was the bartender, a gray-haired man with deep eyes that seemed to carry centuries of wisdom. "Yes, I'm trying to find out what happened to Isabelle. I heard she disappeared many years ago," I replied, feeling the urgency in my voice. "She was a star, kid. She shone brighter than anyone here. But the show business can be cruel. Often, people don't see the truth behind the lights and the music," he said as he poured a glass of whiskey. "Do you know anything about what happened that night?" I asked, leaning forward, absorbing every word. He sighed, looking down at the floor. "A lot of people talk, but few know the truth. Isabelle was involved with a producer, a man named Victor. He was famous, but he also had a dark side. The last time I saw her, she was visibly disturbed. Something had happened between them." A chill ran down my spine. The vision I had of Isabelle being dragged out of the bar was now becoming clearer. "And do you think he had something to do with her disappearance?" "What I think doesn't matter, but what she felt does. She was caught in a toxic relationship. Love can be a prison, and sometimes people can't escape. Her diary, have you found it?" he asked, with a look that seemed to know more than he was saying. "Diary? No, I didn't know she had one," I replied, intrigued. "Where can I find it?" "At the house where she lived. It's a place few visit today. But be careful, kid. Some truths are better left in the shadows," he warned, and a heavy silence hung between us. Bidding farewell to the bartender, I left the bar with my mind racing. Isabelle's diary could be the key to understanding her story, and I needed to find it. Night had fallen by the time I arrived at the house she had called home, an old building with dusty windows and a garden that had lost the battle against time. I entered cautiously, the wood creaking beneath my feet. A strange sensation enveloped me, as if I wasn't just exploring a physical space but also a remnant of Isabelle's soul. The air was heavy, laden with untold memories. I found a room at the back of the house, where the dim light illuminated a small piece of furniture covered in dust. With trembling hands, I opened a drawer, and there it was, a leather-bound diary worn by time. As I opened it, the pages were filled with song lyrics, reflections, and confessions. One song lyric caught my attention. "Sometimes the light is blinding, and I lose myself in the shadows of the love that imprisons me." The words penetrated me, echoing the visions I had experienced. It was as if Isabelle was speaking directly to me. With every line, every verse, I felt her pain and struggle. But then, a new vision suddenly overwhelmed me. I saw Isabelle again, but this time, she was in a tumultuous relationship with a man I couldn't identify. The atmosphere was dark, and the tension was palpable.
Isabelle, no.
"Don't go," I shouted, but she couldn't hear me. The man held her tightly, and a desperate scream echoed in my mind. The sound reverberated, and I found myself trapped between the past and the present, unable to escape. The vision faded, leaving me breathless and confused. I needed to know more about that man, that producer who seemed to be a central figure in Isabelle's torment. What had he really done? The urgency to uncover the truth propelled me back to the city, determined to piece together this dark puzzle. The room was filled with old books and vinyl records piled on shelves that seemed to carry the weight of decades of history. The smell of aged paper and the soft light coming through the window made me feel as if I were in a sanctuary dedicated to music. I was sitting across from Clara, a music history expert who had agreed to help me understand more about Isabelle. "You know, Isabelle was one of the most promising voices of her time," Clara began, looking at me with a mix of admiration and sadness. "She had a talent that hypnotized everyone. But, as you might have heard, fame can be a double-edged sword." "Yes, I heard rumors about her downfall. What happened on the night she disappeared?" I asked, eager for answers. Clara hesitated for a moment, as if the words weighed heavily on her tongue. On the night of her disappearance, there was a tragic event at one of the clubs where she used to perform. The audience was lively, but Isabelle, she wasn't well. They say she had a heated argument with a music producer, someone who had influence over her career, but also over her life. Are you talking about the man who appears in my visions? I couldn't shake the feeling that all of this was intertwining somehow with my own life. What happened between them? Clara took a deep breath, clearly reluctant to share more. There was a lot of pressure on Isabelle. She had a gift, but she was also vulnerable. The producer, he wanted her under his control. What happened that night is still a mystery, but rumors speak of a confrontation that ended in screams and despair. Some people say she was seen leaving the club with him, but no one knows for sure what happened afterward. Clara's words resonated in my mind like a distant echo. The image of Isabelle, her beauty and her pain, blended with my visions, and I felt I was getting closer to uncovering the truth. So, do you believe she was really kidnapped or something worse? I asked, my heart racing. It's possible. The city was full of secrets back then, and many artists were battling personal demons. Isabelle wasn't the only one to disappear, but her story resonates to this day, especially among those who knew her. Clara looked me in the eyes, as if trying to convey the gravity of her words. You seem deeply connected to this, Carl. It's not just a quest for the past. It's something more personal for you, isn't it? I felt exposed, but I couldn't lie. I sense there's a connection between us, as if I'm destined to understand her story. My visions, they aren't just memories. They are fragments of something greater. Then perhaps you should follow that feeling, Clara said, leaning forward. If you believe these visions are a form of communication, maybe Isabelle is trying to tell you something. That night, as I walked back to the hotel, Clara's words echoed in my mind. The city buzzed around me, but I was lost in thought. The voices and melodies of the jazz that filled the air seemed to whisper ancient secrets, and I felt that the answer to Isabelle's mystery was closer than ever. I entered my room, the atmosphere charged with palpable anticipation. As soon as I lay down, a wave of sleep enveloped me, and a new vision began to form before me. This time, it was a confrontation between Isabelle and the producer, an intense scene filled with emotions. I could feel the tension in the air, the fear and anger. The words exchanged between them were sharp, like knives, and I wanted to scream for Isabelle to step away, but I was just a powerless spectator. You can't control me, not anymore, Isabelle shouted, her voice echoing with a strength that made me tremble. The producer, with a desperate and possessive expression, moved toward her. I felt the air around me was about to rupture. It was as if reality was unfolding, revealing a truth I needed to understand. When the vision dissipated, I woke up with a start. My heart raced, and I knew I needed to discover what really happened that fateful night. The visions were becoming more intense, and my connection with Isabelle was deepening. It was time to uncover the truth that so many seemed to have forgotten. The smell of aged paper and the soft sound of pages turning filled the police archive room. As the fluorescent lights buzzed softly, a sense of determination grew within me. I was there to unravel Isabelle's secrets, and nothing would stop me. It's a shame we don't have more information, I murmured to myself, sifting through a pile of documents. What I found there were newspaper clippings, witness accounts, and notes from police officers who seemed as lost as I was. Isabelle's disappearance was a mystery that hung over New Orleans, like a thick fog that never lifted. Ah, here it is, I exclaimed upon seeing the name of a witness. I didn't know who she was, but her testimony could be crucial. A woman in a red dress, I read aloud. The last to see Isabelle before she disappeared. The thrill of hope made my heart race. But who was this woman? I left the archive with my mind buzzing with questions. The sun was setting, painting the sky a vibrant orange, and I let myself be carried away by the beauty of the city, even amid the whirlwind of thoughts. The voices of musicians on the corner echoed, and the melody of a saxophone intertwined with my thoughts. Music has always had a way of guiding me, And I knew the answer was out there, somewhere in the city. "Hey, you look worried," said a man who approached me with a friendly smile. He was a musician, his guitar slung across his back. "New Orleans can be an intense place. What's going on?" "I'm trying to figure out what happened to a jazz singer, Isabelle." "Have you heard of her?" I asked, feeling a sense of relief in sharing my search. "Looking into the past, huh? Isabelle was a legend. But what happened to her?" "Well, that's a dark story," he replied, his tone shifting. "They say the producer managing her had absolute control over her life. Nobody ever knew what really happened that night. I know he was one of the main suspects, but he was never charged," I retorted, my frustration growing. "How can this be? If so many people saw her leave with him, why did no one do anything?" "Ah, my friend, the world of music is full of shadows. Money and power can silence many voices, even the most talented ones," he said, looking down. "But you shouldn't give up. The truth always finds a way to surface." "I need to find that woman in the red dress," I murmured, more to myself than to him. "She may have seen more than the others." "If you need help, I can take you to some places where she used to hang out," the musician offered, his expression full of compassion. "Would you do that?" "That would be amazing," I replied, feeling a wave of hope. Together, we decided that the next step would be to seek out this witness. As we walked through the cobblestone streets, he told me about the nightlife of the city, the stories intertwining with the melodies of jazz. However, as day turned to night, a new vision began to form in my mind. It was as if the very air around me had shifted, and I felt an intense presence. The vision was clear. I saw Isabelle, but this time it was not just a memory. It was as if I were there, in the midst of that fateful night. "No, this can't be," I murmured aloud, stopping abruptly in the middle of the street. It was as if I were watching a movie, but not just as a spectator. I felt her energy, the desperation and struggle she faced. I was there, invisible, yet present. "Are you okay?" the musician asked, concerned. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I saw Isabelle. But I didn't just see her, I was there. "I feel like I'm connected to this somehow," I confessed, trying to process the enormity of the revelation. "These visions, they could be a way for you to understand what happened. You need to dig deeper, Carl. Don't give up now." His words echoed in my mind as we continued our search. Something told me I was getting closer to uncovering the truth, but I also felt that each step I took led me into an abyss of disturbing discoveries. What I would find could change not only Isabelle's story, but my own life forever. The sunlight began to set, painting the sky a deep orange as I walked toward the house where Isabelle lived. Each step took me deeper into a labyrinth of mysteries and emotions, as if I were about to discover not just the past of a woman I never met, but something about myself as well. The warm air of New Orleans enveloped me, and I could hear the soft melody of a saxophone in the distance, a reminder of the city that never seems to sleep. Upon arriving at the house, an old mansion with dusty windows and a somewhat neglected garden, I felt a chill run down my spine. The door creaked open, and the smell of mildew and history hit me hard. I decided to explore the rooms, each one carrying Isabelle's presence as if she were still there, watching me. However, what caught my attention the most was a small office, where a desk was cluttered with yellowed papers and a box of letters. It was then that I found a letter addressed to Isabelle, but without a recipient. My heart raced. Upon opening it, the words danced in my mind. "Dear Isabelle, if you are reading this, know that the life you know may be about to change. I feel that something big is coming, and I cannot stay here. I need freedom, and you deserve more than this city can offer. But please, don't forget me." The words blended with the melody of the saxophone still echoing in my mind. The feeling that I was getting close to the truth was palpable. Isabelle was about to leave, but what was holding her back? What made her hesitate? When I finally left the house, a wave of determination washed over me. I needed to go to the bar where Isabelle performed, the same one I had visited on my first night in the city. The place was lively, the atmosphere vibrant and filled with laughter, but I was more focused on what I might see and feel. As I settled into a corner, the music began to play, and with it, the vision seized me again. The image of Isabelle appeared, clearer than ever. I saw her on stage, but not alone. A group of people surrounded her, and among them was the producer, his gaze fixed, almost predatory. The tension in the air was palpable, and I could feel her anger and fear enveloping her. "You can't control me, I am free!" Isabelle shouted, her voice filled with emotion and power. But the scene quickly turned into chaos. The voices blended with the sound of music, and I could feel her desperation as she tried to break free. "Isabelle, you don't understand. I am the only person who can help you," the producer replied, his voice low but filled with veiled threats. With each word, the scene became more intense and chaotic. I wished I could intervene, to scream, but I was just a spectator. Then, everything exploded into light. A light so bright it blinded me, and in that moment, I lost consciousness. When I regained consciousness, I was lying on the floor of the bar, surrounded by concerned faces. A woman with gray hair and kind eyes leaned over me. "Hi, are you okay?" she asked, her voice soft like the afternoon breeze. "Isabelle, I saw." My voice faltered, but she held my hand. "You saw her, didn't you? This is how it begins. You're an artist, aren't you?" She always sought someone who could understand her suffering. "You might be the key to that." Those words reverberated within me. The connection I felt with Isabelle was becoming more intense, more real. I needed to understand what was happening, how my life intertwined with hers. What more could I discover? What else would I need to face? The mystery was far from resolved, but I was determined to see it through. I woke up in a white, sterile room, the smell of disinfectant strong in the air. The bright daylight streamed through the window, and the distant sound of conversations and laughter from people outside reminded me that the world continued to turn, even though I was trapped in that confined space. My memories of the previous night were a blur, but the image of Isabelle was still fresh in my mind. As I sat up in bed, the pain in my back reminded me that I had somehow fainted. I was interrupted by a gray-haired woman who entered the room. She smiled kindly, but her eyes were filled with a concern I couldn't ignore. "Hi, dear. Are you feeling better?" she asked, adjusting her glasses on the tip of her nose. I don't know. What happened?" My voice came out weaker than I expected. "You fainted during a jazz performance. But don't worry, you're safe now." She approached and took my hand. "I'm Margareth, a friend of Isabelle." My heart raced. "Isabelle? You knew her?" "Yes, I did. She was a star, but also a lost soul, just like you seem to be right now." Margareth looked at me with an intensity that made me feel exposed. "Many have felt her presence, Carl. Musicians, artists. We all believe she's still here, somehow." Those words pierced me like an arrow. "Did you all have visions too?" Margareth nodded. "Yes, and we were waiting for you. After you fainted, we talked about what you saw and our own experiences. We believe Isabelle left messages in her songs." "Messages?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" "Every song she wrote carries a part of her story, a part of her struggle. And we feel that if we can piece together these fragments, we might understand what really happened to her. You could be the key, Carl." Her words echoed in my mind as I tried to process everything. "What are you all thinking of doing?" "We're organizing a tribute show for Isabelle. We want you to sing. You feel it inside you, don't you?" Margareth asked, with a hopeful look. I don't know if I'm good enough," I replied, feeling insecurity take hold of me. "It doesn't matter. What matters is the truth and the emotion you can convey. Isabelle needs you. And so do we." A knot formed in my throat as I heard those words. I knew I needed to do this, not just for Isabelle, but for myself. After a few days of rest and conversations with the musicians, the show was scheduled for the following night. When the night arrived, the bar was packed, and the atmosphere was electric. I was nervous, but a part of me felt alive, as if Isabelle was blowing courage my way. As the musicians began to play, a wave of nostalgia and pain washed over me. It was as if I was about to open a portal to the past. As the audience settled in, I grabbed the microphone and looked at the faces of the musicians around me. They all seemed so connected, so in tune. "This song is for Isabelle," I said, my voice trembling. And then, something extraordinary happened. As I began to sing, the lyrics flowing from my mouth were different. They were lyrics I had never seen before, but they seemed to flow from me as if they had always been there. The melody spoke of struggle, pain, and overcoming, and as I let myself be carried away by the music, I realized I was telling Isabelle's story, but also my own. When I finished, silence enveloped the bar for a moment. Then, applause and cheers erupted, and I felt a wave of emotion wash over me. I looked at the musicians, and they seemed as moved as I was. It was then that one of the musicians, a man with messy hair and a wide smile, approached me. "Carl, you won't believe this, but while you were singing, we realized something. Isabelle, she was your grandmother." The revelation hit me like a lightning bolt. I was there, not just rescuing the memory of an artist, but also rewriting the story of my own family. I had transformed pain into celebration, and the connection I sought was right before me. Isabelle wasn't just a mystical figure, she was a part of me, and now I finally felt her love and her struggle pulsating in my heart.
Hi, you are on the Moving Narratives channel. Subscribe and follow our stories.